Efficiency Unlocked is hosted by two tech-savvy physicians and dear friends of mine, Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold, who are experts in using technology to automate routine tasks and increase efficiency in everyday and business life. Let's see what they have for us today.
Stay tuned for this series of episodes where we'll be discussing the game-changing impact of AI in the realm of patient care and physician well-being.
Get ready to unlock efficiency with NerdMDs.
Efficiency Unlocked.
The impact I see with that is there's a big health equity part of this story. So we know that these models are going to get a lot cheaper over time. So we're basically making a bet that there'll be 10% of users maybe that pay for the pro price, and that will subsidize kind of everyone being able to get access to this technology. We're already seeing that. And then the benefit is that then kind of anyone, any level, someone who maybe wouldn't otherwise be able to afford the $1,000 a year kind of subscription can use Heidi to generate notes, get home on time, spend more time with the kids, all the good things that come from using these Gen AI tools.
That was Dr. Tom, an Australian ex-vascular surgery resident turned founder of Heidi. Before medical school, he studied mathematics and always had an interest in things outside of medicine. He even co-founded and grew Australia's largest pre-medical education business while he was in medical school. It was there that he became obsessed with transformers and AI models that would change the world, which ultimately led to the founding of Heidi in 2019. I hope you enjoy this fun conversation with Dr. Tom, where we talk about the future of his product and also the future of generative AI to help physicians, providers, and patients. Welcome to the show, Thomas. We're super happy to have you from afar. We were just chatting that it is currently about 9 a.m., the day ahead of where I am. I'm currently in the Denver, Colorado area, where it's about 4 p.m. the previous day to Tom. So, Tom, welcome to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me, Adam. Coming to you from the future. Excited to be here and talk a bit more about Heidi.
No, that's awesome. I think I'm really looking forward to this conversation because, we had a pre-conversation a while ago. And I think there's been a lot of cool and excitement around Heidi. And so before we jump into like some of the details around Heidi, I really like for the listeners to get to know the people that are on this show. What makes them tick, why they do what they're doing. So do you mind kind of sharing with the listeners your journey, which, landed you to start Heidi, actually now like several years ago, right? So I'll pass the mic to you.
So I'm Tom. So I'm a doctor by background over in Australia. So I'm based in Melbourne. In 3 years of hospital time, I had lots of different experiences. So residency in the Australian system doesn't start for a few years, so you get to rotate across different systems. So I experienced everything from surgery to family medicine to ICU and lots of different bits and pieces in between. I think everyone who's worked in a hospital setting knows the pain of administration. A lot of the doctors that I worked with loved all the patient parts of care, admitting people, solving the problem for the person in front of them, but then none of the stuff that kept them away from the birthdays and the dinners and the anniversaries, writing forms or staying after work to review results, or disappointing patients in overrun outpatient clinics. I think my journey, so I wasn't always on a path to being a doctor. I actually studied mainly like pure and applied mathematics in my undergraduate degree. And so for a little while there, I was contemplating going down a different path. But when I first grew up, my parents never went to university. They ran a restaurant. And so I knew the pain and suffering of kind of having a career that was just like entrepreneurial and not having a stable base. So some part of me always wanted to do a profession that was a little safe, like if everything, if there was an apocalypse, we'd probably still need medical care of some kind. So that was one thing I was looking for in a career. And I also really enjoyed just like talking to people, solving interesting problems, rather than kind of being in a room on my own solving some esoteric math equation with a chalkboard. So yeah, stars aligned. I did all the like MCAT equivalents and things to get into medicine, and then gone full circle into a high risk, startup, leaving behind my vascular surgery residency to go all in for Heidi. And I think so. During medical school, my sort of part-time job kept me fed and with a roof over my head was another business. So we were helping people get into medicine. So we did kind of like your MCAT admission type of business, pretty common for medical students who have entrepreneurial instincts to do that kind of thing. And we use transformers there to do content creation and support. So this was in like 2000, say like 18, 19 range. I think BERT had just been released from Google, like a pre-trained biology model. And for me, that was the start of an obsession about like, if these things got better and more powerful, how would that change my day-to-day? And it sort of never really left me. And then up until the point in 2021 where we just decided to go for it and found the company. So happy to tell you more, but that's the gist.
No, that's a great story. I mean, I think there's, I know there's recent data in the US that there's a large percentage of physicians going through training that even early in their training, they're already kind of making the decision or heavily contemplating even going into clinical medicine, which is a little bit of a concern for
it's kind of a shame
to take care of people. But, I think, I think people have, different interests and passions. And I mean, you clearly have always had that kind of inkling based on that story. And I mean, obviously starting that initial company, as far as like kind of pre-training the medical students before they go in. So, from that initial kind of spark that you mentioned when you were kind of starting to see these language models and some of these transformer models being talked about and kind of seeing them work, to obviously where they are today, and obviously the rate at which they're improving. When did you really make that decision to say like, man, I got to start a company around that? Because I think you mentioned, did you start Heidi in 2019 or was it later than that?
Yeah. So the company actually started in 2019, but a company starting inverted commas is really just me and a couple of friends thinking through what we might want to do.
Sure.
So 2021 was when we first raised venture money and we first all went full time. So that was when
Got it.
It sort of went from being a garage band to a serious operation. I think so. So actually the obsession, I think, for me started a lot earlier. So when I was studying, like part of my maths coursework was these recurrent neural nets and some other like more of these like early like basic comp sci type of courses where you learn about, doing all of the different kind of optimization goals and other things to create systems and models that can do prediction really well. And I remember at the time I was trying, I think it was Wix.ai and Dialogflow. So I think the founders of Wix now are the founders of Nabla. So even as early as that, I was shocked how good they were. Like I'd had experiences as a consumer using airport chatbots that were terrible and were just blocking me from talking to a human. But then when I used some of these like intent and entity-based systems, they worked really well. So basically my impression was, wow, like this is actually closer to real than I thought. It's not as sci-fi, as June or these other books where they talk about artificial intelligence. Like this could actually happen in my lifetime. And so I had an idea that like that was definitely going to change things, but I was maybe a little anchored to like these more brittle models that could do one thing really well, like, maybe dermatology, skin scanning software, or like not something super general, something very highly trained for one task. But then, when the first Transformers came out, and specifically, I think it was GPT-2 and GPT-1. So that's like the Babbage and Ada models now. I just couldn't believe how good they were. Like, it was definitely, they weren't quite smart enough to do note taking really well, but they would definitely, there was a clear path of how that would get better. So they could already do choose your own adventure dungeon games. I think there was a game called GPT Dungeon. Don't know if anyone's heard of it, but basically you could choose your own adventure, one of those old typing based games. And there was that. And then at the same time, I was starting to do vascular surgery residency, starting to be like overworked, having to do so much documentation, op reports, outpatient clinics, post-operative reviews, like all of this work was building up. And there was a nexus in that 2019 range. We're starting to realize that probably with some fine tuning and some other tricks, we could get that level of model that already existed to at least do some of the more structured types of notes that I was doing in a semi-automated way, maybe by adding sort of a knowledge graph or other bits and pieces to make it work. And I think like quite a few companies started roughly that time. I think like some of the other companies doing the same thing, like a Bridge and others, because there were other breakthroughs in like knowledge graph technologies and knowledge graph recurrent neural networks that could compress large medical knowledge graphs into fast enough systems to do note taking effectively, and to do like kind of the ontology. So to do that whenever you see systems that show you like a significant word and a definition of that word, or like a linking between different concepts, that's usually there's some knowledge graph behind the scenes. That's also how Google search works when they show you that little dynamic text. Anyway, so the non-technical version of this is that there was enough of a set of open source technologies that Waleed and you, the three founders at Heidi, spoke to each other. Like, this is a huge opportunity. Let's just try to build something that would make my life better, day to day. And then if it was good enough, maybe we'll quit our jobs. And that's basically what happened. We got to a point where I had to choose. I was either going to go full time, leave Heidi behind, or try to raise money. And we spoke to the kind of like the best Australian venture capital firm, Blackbird. They invested in Canva and run by some of the Atlassian founders. We one shot at there. We spoke to them. They wanted to back us and haven't looked back.
That's great. I just think it's so fascinating too, because I think we've had other guests on this show that, have some sort of personal story that, led them down the path of founding. But, I think specifically for like physician founders, I think it's what's interesting is, you're truly trying to create this to help the clinicians, you're trying to create a product. And I think it's a way where you can be, this solution can be much bigger of an impact, for the greater kind of medical community than, frankly, you or I would ever have been as an individual physician. I think that's why a lot of physicians get into leadership. It's kind of the same thing. You want to be more kind of broadly effective, but I think that's just a common theme that I definitely hear.
Exactly. It's like there's only so many Band-Aids you can put on or stitches you can do, Yeah.
Correct. So let's kind of pivot a little bit to, the product, Heidi. You've obviously alluded to it. You've talked about some of the history, about how it kind of got started. But why don't you talk a little bit about like what it does today and what, you feel, obviously this technology has, broad implications and benefits to the greater medical community, but specifically for Heidi, where do you think, there's the specific impact that you see Heidi contributing to this space?
Yeah, so I think, so as far as I'm aware, we're the only scribe that does the note generating for free. So that's one big differentiating point. So you can create notes like forever for free on Heidi. The impact I see with that is there's a big health equity part of the story. So we know that these models are going to get a lot cheaper over time. So we're basically making a bet that there'll be 10% of users maybe that pay for the pro price, and that will subsidize kind of everyone being able to get access to this technology. We're already seeing that. And then the benefit is that then kind of anyone, any level, someone who maybe wouldn't otherwise be able to afford the $1,000 a year kind of subscription can use Heidi to generate notes, get home on time, spend more time with the kids, all the good things that come from using these Gen AI tools. And then probably the other slant as part of that is just having a more like a real obsession with trying to be the clinician's tool. So I despised hospital down selling and like tools that were forced on me from higher ups, because so often when you're selling to like a CIO or a CEO, they're the customer of the product. So you're building things that, trying to appease their interests, make the billing and coding work really well, make it heavily integrated, satisfy all of the data requirements. And, basically like your product becomes wining and dining executives and making sure they're happy with the flexibility of your tool. But that's not really what end clinicians want. The end clinicians want something that's fast, works well, and actually really writes like them. So that's, I think, the kind of core insight maybe that I think I haven't seen as much out in the marketplace, which is like when you're trying to get everyone to use this, not just 10%, if you're trying to get every single person using this tool, there is a degree of obsession about the way the system writes that even I didn't anticipate. Because I always sort of shrugged my shoulders. Like I looked at my notes as a sort of like all they're really here for is medical legal proof, like for the lawyer that's going to read this in the future. Like that's what this is for. Maybe for my memory, like next time I see the patient, I want to remember what I did last time. And then maybe a bit of synthesis, perhaps like, thinking through what's going on, like trying to come up with an impression of what I think is happening. But besides that, like I don't really mind the format or how it's written, or, whether it's dot points or not dot points, or whether it's fully written or with patient quotes, or anyway, but others do care. I'm not like everyone.
Yep. Doctors have opinions.
Exactly. So like a couple of things in Heidi you can do today. So you can create pretty much any template you want. And you can also create a custom set of instructions for Heidi to behave in a certain way. So like we have vets, dentists, hypnotherapists, anesthetists, everyone that can put you to sleep using Heidi. And that's because of the flexibility. So it's quite easy to create kind of any template you like. And then we also let you have like an open conversation with Heidi as this kind of AI resident with the context of your visit. So if you want to ask for ICD-10 codes or relevant Medicare Advantage information, or really for anything that's relevant to the patient or animal in front of you, you can do it. And that's really where we monetize the product, and where we're going to continue to lean is that the note generating, making that fast and good is just like table stakes, and that's free, because soon enough you're going to be able to do that for free with ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, or it basically just trying to make a buck, and there's a race to the bottom, and so we're just at the bottom, like we'll just beat everyone there. So that's the point of that. And then we'll create features that are really clinician centric, that maybe would be a waste of time if we were selling to hospitals, but really trying to go bottoms up, get clinicians using the product in the free version, and then have these unique features and ideas that maybe others won't. We have lots and lots of ideas of what happens next. I think it really just centers around this idea of like, if you could have an AI resident, what would that resident do? Like, what are all the tasks as a clinician that are time consuming, non-value added, and really could have not be automated is the wrong word, more just like be supplemented or supported by some sort of agent that could think like you, drive the UI potentially. We're excited to build all those things. Things like, you click, based on the context of the visit, we hear that you would need to do a repeat prescription or a repeat set of labs for the patient. You've separately gone on your screen, installed a Chrome extension. We've seen what you do in your EHR. So you just click a button, we open a tab, we do that action, and then you click confirm when you're happy with it. Obviously, we wouldn't do it for all things, but for the things that are, 10 clicks that frustrate you, then we can do it for you. So there's lots of different things we'll do.
No, it's very cool. It's, what you were just describing, and, previously when we met, obviously you showed me a little bit of the product too at that point. But I think it's, it's very similar to like actually an email platform that I love. There's an email platform called Spark, and it's based out of the Ukraine. And I mean, it's a great product, and it's very similar to the model that you just described. You can get Spark for free. You can, connect to your email accounts. You can use it, but they have like a Spark Premium, that you can get these added features. And frankly, what they've been adding more often recently is more artificial intelligence, generative AI kind of cool tools to augment your use of email, very much like Microsoft Copilot works. But I think that model is interesting because it's clearly worked in software, right? I mean, it clearly works for mobile applications. And so, I know I shared that with you before, but I think it's a really interesting play,
Thanks.
to go that route. And, I guess it's a bit of a hedge or a bet on your side, or gamble, I guess, so to speak. But if you're already starting to see some of that promise early on, I think it has a good chance of working well.
Yeah, and there's one other non-obvious thing that we're realizing now, which is if you do the top-down selling, I think sort of, although as founders and as people interested in this stuff, we're kind of obsessed with this day to day, the average clinician out there is probably somewhere in that adopter bell curve. So I think it'll tip really quickly, but I still think, maybe it's that 10, 20, 30% of clinicians are ready to use this every day as a tool that, basically they stop writing notes. The vast majority of the rest aren't quite there yet, whether it's just feeling comfortable with it. It's not so much about the product itself. It's just, they're just not there and not ready for it. They don't see the benefit yet. So if you spend like a year selling into a large system and then doing all this implementation effort and change management and other things, you're ultimately only going to get adoption of that initial kind of set that are wanting to use the product. And I think we've seen that in some of the studies published in like NEDGM, with NABLA, and I think like some others as well, where it's probably not the fault of anyone at all. It's just there's only a subset of clinicians that are ready to use that product. So what we're finding is that by kind of selecting for clinicians that want to use it today, because they're already kind of self-onboarding and picking to use it, we're just going to get so much more utilization. I mean, that's why the product initially crashed so many times, because we were just so ahead of schedule as far as usage goes. But even just on like the raw consult numbers, like if things keep tracking as expected, I wouldn't be surprised in the next, say, year or 2 years, like we'd have more consults done on Heidi than kind of any other product. And then that means that we can create smaller, precise, fine-tuned models that are really good for specific clinicians. I think that's the bet I'm most interested in. So imagine like you're a hospitalist in Denver, let's say, and you sign up for the first time. There's all these unique nuances about conditions you can get in that region, referral pathways, maybe like the way you were taught at those schools about how to write or document or take histories. It's all these like little subtle things. And then if you sign up and you start using the product, Heidi will just feel like more natural to you, because we'll increasingly start fine-tuning the models more and more narrowly. So first it's just specialty level, then it goes into regional differentiation, and then maybe even one day down to the individual. So it's almost like an algorithm, like a TikTok or something like that, where we basically learn your habits and behavior. And it's quite important for the AI resident tasks to be like you, because if it's like the first time you go on a round with a resident and they don't know what they're doing, and it's a bit dangerous potentially, and you have to be, they're making sure they do all the right things. But then after, say, 3 months, you feel comfortable with them. They know all of your quirks and preferences, and it just feels just right. So that's the same idea here. We're going to have to learn all your quirks and behaviors. It can't just be some foundation model off the shelf. Like, it has to be something that you've deeply influenced and trust. And then that's when you start to give it the wheel in some circumstances. Anyway, so that is part of that free strategy, I guess, is there is a real benefit to having lots of usage. Helps us make the product better. Yeah.
No, that's great. It's I think it's a good approach, and it's clearly different. Yeah, like I said before, from anybody that I've come across so far. So I think it's cool. Do you early on now? I mean, since Heidi is still relatively new, I mean, do you have do you have a story or an example from a clinician who's been using this, and that you can just kind of highlight and share like how they thought this product really helped them?
Yeah, I think so. So there's probably a couple. So the one that I think is most interesting. So there was a GP. Her name's Maureen. So she started using the product just to document notes. So primary care doctor seeing patients. The system here, they usually have sort of 10 to 15 minutes to do initial visits. They can do longer visits, but it's usually quite fast paced. So inevitably, there's this kind of debt that grows over the day. And then by the end of the day, you have, all these sticky notes and tasks that you didn't have time to do. And so you stay from 5 till 7 p.m. And so I think her quote was something like, it's like being on school holidays. Like I finish the day and I don't have any homework, and I can just go home and have dinner and spend time with the kids. So I think that was one of the first times that that pajama time sentiment around grabbing a glass of wine and reviewing all your results and writing all your letters, that saving that time has been a common theme. But the thing that I thought was the most interesting was, so Maureen actually had a patient who was I think a retired nurse practitioner who'd had a stroke and just couldn't deal with the use of EHRs. It sounds crazy, but far-fetched, but this actually happened. So it's just because she lost some of her motor skills on one of her hands, couldn't drive the mouse. It was like too much of a fuss. She was only working a few days a week. Maureen showed her the software, so all she had to do was click one button and then click stop and just review the note and then just copy paste, and it was done. And she actually went back to work using Heidi. So yeah, that was like a mind-blowing example of how, because you don't really think of it in that way. Like those little frustrations, most clinicians are just, it's annoying, sure, but you just do it. So that was a real the most cool story I think we've seen.
No, it's a great story. I mean you don't always think of these technologies being available or being transformational for someone that has some sort of adaptive mean, but it does. I mean, and you think of even just simple dictation. I mean, I remember when that was even kind of not really widespread, and when people broke their arm or broke their hand or something, they would always reach out and be like, "Can I get a license? Like, I need this." And but that's amazing that someone that had a significant medical problem was able to literally practice again, which is
go back to work,
which is very cool. Along the lines with what you've already kind of shared about Heidi as a product and a little bit of that kind of strategy or visionary plan. Is there anything you can share with us, kind of giving what you think the glimpse of the future, of Heidi will be, if this all goes to plan, which I obviously hope it will.
For sure. Yeah, so I think in the next release, so we're doing a big UI refresh, which will take a few weeks, but basically that idea of a resident is really going to start to permeate the product. So what we found is that if people use custom templates and have these kind of conversations with Heidi, we call it Ask Heidi or Ask AI, they usually really love the product. They really stick. And it makes sense because rather than getting some generic output, it's very easy to modify it, edit it, do additional new tasks with it. So I'm really excited to lean into that. So basically you have this omnipresent kind of search bar at the bottom of your note. And even, to be honest, you might be able to do this without your note eventually. So it will become like a search sort of function. So you'll be able to do things with your notes. That's just the basic, minimum is make it briefer, make it more detailed, change the name out to this, or, just give me the plan with the ICD-10 codes, please, or, basically whatever you want. That's all the basic stuff. But then so we are going to start to do EHR integrations. We've started with most of the major ones. We've agreed in principal terms, and we're starting to do it different. Basically, just stack ranked the most users that have X EHR, go through them one by one. But I'm quite excited to make that actually search the record. So imagine during a visit, let's say you're seeing, I don't know, a 4-year-old boy comes in with his mum. His mum says that he's been getting sick just so often. Like, he's sick all the time. He's never well. Maybe the average doctor would sort of be like, oh, it's just concerned mother, like unlikely, not remembering that this person has been seen by 60 different doctors in the last 4 years and has had so many recurrent, otitis media and like other infections, viral illnesses. So a really interesting product is surfacing relevant insights from the record in the context of that note, right near the search bar. To say we found that 60 records of previous infection. They can click into it and they can see links into the record of all of the different previous visits that this person's had. Or we don't even need to do that automatically. You can just say, has this patient had anything that would make you concerned about primary immunodeficiency? And maybe the answer is no. Like, nope, this patient is the first time you've seen this patient, no documented history of anything, no family history, has had a normal number of infections for a child his age. So that sort of starts to get into, we call it chat with the record. So sort of Heidi chats to the record, does that large language model with, I think it's called retrieval assisted generation, so RAG. So basically you find resources like a real knowledge base and then do quoted references in your answer. So that's one interesting thing. Then extending from that, using that search to do a little more than just your note. So having those next action chips. So basically you probably download a Chrome extension. We're still experimenting with different ways to do this. You log into EHR. We may or may not have a integration, but if we don't, that's still fine. You open a tab, you show us how, basically like a macro kind of, you show us how you would do a particular set of actions. You basically train Heidi on however many next actions you want us to be able to do. And then in the visit, you'd say, I need a letter, like an ongoing referral letter to my cardiologist, or I need a prescription. You click a button, we just go off and do that task, either in a virtual machine or maybe on a tab, depending on what your EHR setup is. And obviously, so some of this when you're in the clinic room doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, because it's like, well, I could just do that while I'm talking to the patient. But I think the bigger benefit of those next actions is when you're on the go. So if you're admitting a patient or you're in a hospital setting, you're on your phone, you don't have the computer on wheels in front of you, you've got 20 people to admit, you can just click your, yep, based on this note, I'm happy, I've written my plan, I'm just going to click on these 5 next actions that I have to do. And then when I get back to a computer, I've got all of those drafted for me to review and sign off. Lots of other ideas, I think. But those are the ones we're focused on. I think, so one other one which I'm interested in is some sort of crowdsourcing. This would be down the track, but I can imagine.
Sure.
Again, lots of complexities around confidentiality and consent and other things, but imagine I'm a primary care doctor, I'm seeing a patient, I have no idea what's going on. I ask Heidi and we can say, a cardiologist in Ohio and the Cleveland Clinic would have done this for this patient, or something like that is quite interesting. But that relies on a really large scale of users, lots of complexity we're not ready for yet. But like a resident would call cardiology and tell you what to do. Same idea.
I love every example you just gave. It's like that extra human resident that you had, that could kind of do all those things in the background as you're kind of running around.
Mine the record for you.
And mining the record. And, in that last one, that you said is, it's compelling too. That's the, the benefit of like the health system I work in right now is it's integrated, and it's multi-specialty. So I can actually ask those types of questions, specifically to those. But I think anybody that works outside of an integrated system like that, doesn't necessarily have that resource, so like getting that, I assume, do you guys call it a curbside? That's the terminology we use in the US, when you would normally like bump shoulders with cardiologist in the hospital and kind of show them the EKG and say, hey, what do you think about this? But, that's like the digital AI version of a curbside, which is very cool.
Yeah. I think so. And definitely there's also a bit which I didn't talk about, which is the patient side of things. So there's a really interesting way, like we know some people have already done this, where you could share. So, sorry, let's take a step back. I think a lot of patients are going to use these models as their doctor at some point. Whether you like it or not, people already are. They're on ChatGPT asking about their symptoms. Now, ignoring all the regulatory concerns about that, let's just take that. Okay, this is the new kind of Google My Symptoms experience. Well, it would be really interesting to actually connect the clinician to those conversations. So imagine you share your Heidi with patients. Again, it's like a resident, like the resident kind of fields these queries for you. So you share your plan after the end of the visit. You say, if you have any questions, new concerns, new symptoms, just chat to Heidi. It's connected to me. If there's anything of concern, and I can see all these conversations. Like, it's the best way to do this rather than just Googling, it's a bit dangerous. And one, obviously you can share plans. That's a basic thing. But then two, we like the idea of like a really interesting, like kind of medical information giving process. So they can ask questions about their medicines. They can potentially ask questions like, did this happen in this visit? I can't remember what Dr. Tom said. And then same idea, we do quoted references, clearly guardrailed medical information that's sourced from sources you choose. And then if it goes outside of those boundaries, give them links to reschedule in with you or connect into your, MyChart chat or wherever the right place is for them to kind of document something new. And yeah, again, sort of like a resident, the resident explains the plan to the family or to other clinicians, fields questions, like tries to protect you and your time from sort of everything that patients want from you. So yeah, that kind of AI doctor in your pocket could really be like, it's still me, but it's connected to me as your clinician, but and it's sort of safer because it's within those constraints, but you can still do that, Google your own symptoms kind of thing.
No, that's cool. I've had conversations like around that concept with others, as we're kind of, conceptualizing or spitballing where we think this future would go. And it's cool to think of it all wrapped into the kind of the same product, that, again, just that extension, now your resident is answering the phone calls and answering the emails, answering the inquiries for you too. It's having that true assistant, which is definitely cool. So, knowing this, thanks for sharing all the different kind of aspects of Heidi and kind of where your thought process is. 'Cause I think it's super, I think it's very cool to understand that deeper layer, of the people behind these products. What, how do you, I can probably answer this for you, but I'll ask you the question anyways. How do you pitch Heidi right now? What is like your go-to of like your quick elevator pitch?
Yeah, so I usually say, so Heidi's a free AI medical scribe. You click record your visit in a compliant, secure way, and then we generate your notes. But we then use that context of the visit to let you do other things. So you can basically chat to Heidi. Most of the things a resident can answer, Heidi can answer today. And then in the next 2-3 years, anything a human resident could do, Heidi will be able to do, maybe just not pushing around a computer, but most of the other things. And that's kind of it.
Maybe someday it will be pushing around something.
Exactly. Heidi will be embodying the robot.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, super cool. Awesome. Well, Thomas, I super appreciate you taking time, obviously, to spend this conversation with me. I'd love to kind of wrap it up with some like fun questions. For sure. We always call it our Nerd Alert lightning round, but there's a couple nerdy questions, but most of them are just kind of cool questions for you. So you are free to pass on these. You are free to give a quick answer. You can give a little more robust answer. So I guess first one, kind of warm up. What are your favorite hobbies outside of your work?
Yeah. So I love basketball. So I'm pretty tall. Not as tall as my dad. My dad's nearly 7 feet. So I'm 6'6". So love basketball. I'm old. I'm washed. I was never that good, but I still love playing with my friends. Cooking. Love. Both my parents are cooks. I love to cook, make complicated things and eat it all. What else do I like to do? I don't know. Lots of hobbies. Play the guitar. I broke my leg playing basketball and then took the 6 months break to do something useful. So I learned to play.
Learned how to play an instrument.
Yeah, they keep me busy.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's cool. It's a funny thing too, because obviously we can see each other right now as we're recording this, but we can't tell how tall we are. And I'm about 6 feet 4 inches too, and I played basketball in college. And
nice.
Now I would say I'm more old and washed up now too, and I mainly from just old chronic orthopedic things, but that's cool. And cooking is great too. I know during COVID pandemic, we did a couple of those like Zoom kind of cooking instructional things where a chef was like kind of teaching us cool. And, all across with different family members. It was a hoot. No, those are great. And I've always found that people that start companies and are creative like this usually have a lot of other hobbies and skills. So you fit the bar there. So I guess let's do this one. Do you have a favorite place that you've ever visited, either locally or further away from your homeland?
I'm trying to have like a unique answer. Okay, my favorite place to go is Singapore. I love Singapore. I think it's an amazing city. If you haven't been, you should go. Like the thing I love most about Singapore is they have just like their high and low is so good. Like the low, you go to a hawker center. So that's they have all these little stalls that usually family run, that cook maybe maximum 5 dishes. And they're just usually like the food is just amazing. Some of them have Michelin stars and they're just $5 for a plate of something. But then the high is like you can, be overlooking this like beautiful river and like these hotels and, there's like very interesting colonial buildings, beautiful cocktail in hand. So yeah, I love Singapore. It's just a beautiful place. I've also been, where else have I been? Lots and lots of places. I think that's my favorite. Maybe Rome, Campo de Fiore. That's actually where my family's from. So Campo de Fiore is like sort of, I think it's a market on the weekends. It's like a very historic area of Rome. It's near the Colosseum. Again, really good pizza and pasta. And yeah, you just walk around and you just feel history. That's hard to explain.
Yeah. No, that's what we did a trip recently to the UK, and even there, it was like just the history of stuff, and some of the buildings or some of the ruins that were like juxtaposed right next to some super modern building. Like it just was, obviously coming from being from the US, like the US isn't that old, like in the scope of humanity. And that was definitely cool. And obviously your Singapore tips sound pretty amazing too. Now in the spirit of this podcast, we shared about your product and how it makes others, more efficient and happy. Do you have like a personal efficiency kind of tool or hack that you particularly like?
That is a good question. So I really like Superhuman. I don't know if anyone said this one before, but it's an email product. It's really good. I think the founder, Rahul, has been going at it for a long time. He's written lots of interesting blog articles about building good products. Basically, the whole thing was built on this idea of like everything that happens in Superhuman has to happen in less than 100 milliseconds. So it has to be like basically imperceivably fast. And it's just a simple thing, but like you hit E, it's like for archive, and then you immediately see your next email. And all these small gains add up to just it being way faster than anything else. Other productivity stuff, thinking it through. We use Notion. So I have a really good my task, like my timeline type of thing. So I do try to have like a ticketing system for myself. Otherwise I just never get anything done. There's just too many things. So I have a ticketing system. I prioritize everything. So I put priorities and then just rank from high to low. And what I find is I just never do the lows. So if things are low, they either get so overdue and urgent that they become a high, or they just never get done, which I think is actually, it's a good loop. You know, you're optimizing for the things that have the highest impact. If you don't have that, some sort of reinforcing loop like that, you'll just end up doing whatever thing that person is asking in front of you, and it's not always the most important thing.
Yep. Tyranny of the urgent, that's kind of the
exactly.
But no, that's great. So Notion and Superhuman, those are both, I think, great tips. I think Superhuman has been mentioned when I've asked this sort of question, but no one's mentioned Notion yet, which I think Notion's a great product.
Yeah, really.
I agree. And I guess I'll end with this one. If you could have a superpower, what would it be and why?
I think mind reading would be a good one. I think I'm pretty empathetic. Like I roughly can figure out what people are thinking, but look, it'd probably, I'd probably become psychotic very quickly and it would all go to shit. But ignoring that, assuming that there's like some anti-psychosis thing that comes with it, it would be really useful to know. Yeah, just like what are the motivations driving people? The thing that I think of is mainly in the context of running a team. It's so important to make sure that you're coaching young people in the right way, making sure you because I'm a young leader as well, so I want to make sure that I have the right style for the person in front of me. So not all people react in the same way to the same style of management or incentives. So I think that'd be a really, really useful tool. If it was purely like hedonistic, like just for like something for fun, I think it would just be like just instant transport, like teleporting. That would be super useful.
Yeah.
Just go from A to B instantly. Go have lunch in Singapore and then just come home.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Like be able to go to all these places that you could just go quickly have a picnic somewhere and then be able to be right back where you are. Yeah, that'd be amazing. But I think that the other concept of you mentioned it, like mind reading, but like being able to read like people's own individual style. I think that would be. Because I think some people have some of that skill set to be able to kind of maybe understand that and like adapt. But yeah, that's I think that's a great skill. It's a great skill for a leader and great skill for just people in general.
Yeah. It's sort of what we're trying to do with Heidi, like mind read their style, like, well, how do you want this written? Yeah. It's the same idea. Or like as a doctor, perfect. Like how painful really was it? Like, can I relive that experience?
Yeah. I love the loop back to Heidi. Well, awesome, Tom. I want to be respectful of your time since your morning is getting rolling. But I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the NerdMD's podcast.
No worries.
And any last parting word you'd love to say?
No, just thanks so much for having me. If you're currently paying for a scribe, don't use Heidi. We'll even give you money back towards the pro plans. So highly recommend giving it a try. We have intercoms, so message us on the page. We're usually me replying at all hours of the day. Just thanks so much for the time, Adam. Really appreciate it. All the work you do.
No, that's great. Yeah, thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to Efficiency Unlocked, nerd tested, MD approved. a Nerd MDs podcast by Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold.